Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving straight into the Philippines' national survival strategy. We're looking at a huge paradigm shift in how we handle natural and human-made threats. And more importantly, we're going to discover why your specific role as a student is actually hard-coded right into the law. Let's get right into it.
So let's start with a slightly provocative thought. Can disasters actually be avoided? I mean, for decades, we just kind of assumed that typhoons, floods, and earthquakes were simply unavoidable tragedies, right? The prevailing belief was, well, nature strikes, people suffer, and all we can really do is pick up the pieces afterward. But what if we've been looking at this entirely the wrong way? What if the actual disaster part isn't as inevitable as the hazard itself?
To figure that out, here's our game plan for today. 1. Shifting our disaster mindset. 2. The RA 10121 paradigm shift. 3. Core concepts of DRRM. 4. A whole society approach. And 5. The youth NSTP role.
Section 1. Shifting our disaster mindset.
To truly grasp where we're headed, we have to look back at the historic flaw in how we used to handle these constant environmental threats. The contrast between our past and present is honestly a bit jarring. Under the old 1978 law, that's Presidential Decree 1566, disaster management was purely reactive. It was mostly just handing out relief goods after the damage was already done. But after devastating events like Typhoon Ondoy in 2009 proved that this just wasn't cutting it, the Philippines experienced a massive paradigm shift. In 2010, Republic Act 10121 was passed. This officially shifted our national strategy to proactively addressing the root causes of risk before the storm even hits.
Which brings us to Section 2, Core Concepts of DRRM. To actually execute this proactive, life-saving strategy, we need to speak the language of the law. The first core concept you need to know is a hazard. Now, these are the actual threats. They can be natural phenomena, the typhoons, floods, earthquakes, and droughts that we're all too familiar with. But hazards also include human-made activities, things like epidemics, wars, and terrorism. Basically, a hazard is your trigger event. Next up is vulnerability. This refers to the specific characteristics of a community that make it susceptible to a hazard. Think of this as the weaknesses that leave us exposed. For example, if you have a highly dense population living right in a known high-risk flood zone without proper shelter, well, that is a severe vulnerability. It's exactly what makes the hazard dangerous to those specific people.
But then on the flip side of vulnerability, we have capacity. This is our armor. Capacity encompasses all the strengths, attributes, and resources available within a community that make it capable of coping with and recovering from a disaster. We're talking robust infrastructure, strong governance, and the wise use of resources. Capacity is exactly what allows a community to absorb a massive shock and bounce back even better.
So how do all these elements interact? Well, think about a typhoon out in the middle of the empty ocean. It isn't a disaster, right? It's literally just a hazard. It only transforms into a disaster risk when vulnerable communities are exposed to it without the proper capacity to fight back. Simply put, disaster risk is the exposure of vulnerable communities to a hazard.
This dynamic brilliantly illustrates our National Action Plan. To systematically manage disasters, we have to actively neutralize our vulnerabilities by building very specific, tangible capacities. If poverty is a vulnerability, then creating diversified livelihoods becomes the capacity we build. If a dense, unorganized population is a weakness, we counter that with highly organized communities. If weak infrastructure is the risk, we retrofit it and build it stronger. It's this deliberate, constant balancing act, reducing the weaknesses and heavily enhancing our strengths.
Moving on to Section 3. A whole society approach.
Here's a quick reality check for you. The government simply cannot enhance all these capacities and reduce all these risks on its own. It's just too monumental a task. Because of that, the law literally mandates a whole-of-society approach. It heavily relies on civil society organizations, or CSOs, as well as the private sector and volunteers. We're talking cooperatives, neighborhood associations, NGOs, church-based groups, and crucially, academic institutions. They complement the government's resources, and their involvement is legally baked into everything from the early planning stages right through to on-the-ground implementation.
And that perfectly sets up Section 4, the youth NSTP role.
This brings the narrative directly to you. Since you're sitting in an academic institution right now, you are definitely not just an afterthought in this massive legislative shift. Your involvement is officially mandated by law. Section 14 of the DRRM Act officially weaves disaster preparedness into the educational system. It explicitly requires that disaster risk reduction be integrated into school curricula, and specifically into your National Service Training Program, or NSTP. The law recognizes that educating and training you, the youth, is a fundamental building block of our national survival.
So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, whether you're learning hands-on CPR to save a life or getting your hands dirty doing environmental fieldwork to protect the local ecosystem, you aren't just doing busy work for your NSTP requirement. By learning first aid or participating in early warning drills, you are quite literally building that critical capacity we talked about earlier. You are personally becoming the resource that protects your community.
To sum up this entire paradigm shift, let's look back at the foundational definition of DRR. It is a systematic effort to analyze and manage the causes of disasters by reducing vulnerabilities and enhancing capacities. Through your education and your NSTP training, you are directly addressing those root causes. This knowledge transforms you. It takes you from being a potentially vulnerable victim and turns you into an active, capable architect of your community's resilience.
So I'll leave you with this thought to carry into your coursework. You now understand the law, you get the paradigm shift, and you know exactly which capacities need to be built. But the real test isn't going to be on a piece of paper. When the sirens sound and that next hazard strikes, will your community be vulnerable? Or, because of your active participation, will you be ready? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope it empowers you to take your NSTP role to heart.